Welcome to HigherEdLive, the live legal web show all about the world of higher education. We're all about digital development and professional empowerment. I am your host. Let's pull it up there. It's right there. Seth Odell, coming to you live from Albany, New York, my hometown. I am back. We are here in readMedia headquarters. readMedia, check them out. We'll tell you more about them in a second. In Albany, New York, they're hosting us for the night, and I am here with the one and only Rachel Reuben. Rachel, how are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me.
I'm very happy for you to be here. I've been trying to get Rachel on the show for a while, and she was like, I don't know, but you know, I think I finally convinced her. I had to come back east to make it happen, but I'm really glad that we did. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us. As you can see, we're in person. We're doing things a little differently, so I might need your help a little bit tonight. So, use the hashtag HigherEdLive. Questions, comments. We're going to try and show whatever we can. Pull it up on screen. Answer your questions because we're talking all about rebranding and higher education. That's what we're talking about tonight. And again, that's what we're going to do. So before we get into it, got to thank a couple sponsors real quick because that's the way we do it here at HigherEdLive. Got to thank those that help us make it happen. So Integral. That's right, guys. Thanks to Integral, they're sponsors of HigherEdLive. They're the creators of the Schools app on Facebook. Be sure to check out their webinar series about how they can help you leverage Facebook to increase yield and retention. That happens this Friday. Mark your calendars, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to send a tweet out with that link in just a second in case you are interested. Also, big thanks out to Omni Update. They're the leading web content management system provider for higher education. The company's web CMS OU campus is secure and scalable with great tools and features, deployment flexibility, and you know what? It's got an awesome user community to boot. In fact, it was the highest ranked CMS in the Customer Satisfaction 2010 EDU Guru Survey. So if you need a CMS, you know what to do. Check out OmniUpdate.com. Thank you to those sponsors, and welcome back to HigherEdLive. As I said, I am joined with Rachel Reuben, the Associate Vice President of Marketing Communications at Ithaca College. I always mess something up at the beginning, but that's okay because this is a really long show, so I totally have a chance to turn this around. So before we get into the show tonight, I want to say a couple quick things so you guys know. First off, midweek this week, I'm going to be in Chicago going live with a special HigherEdLive on Wednesday from something called Teens Talk. It's at the StateMates Integrated Marketing Conference. It's a really awesome hour-long panel with high school students that are on their way into college, talking all about their experiences with your institutions, how they liked your websites, if they liked your campus tours. This is a chance for us to really hear right from the students themselves and what their experiences were with admissions. So check that out, guys. I'm going to send a tweet out in a little bit, but you guys want to watch this special. It's awesome. And that's not the only announcement. We also have a little something this Friday. Mike Petroff will tell you an EDU tweet up in Boston Friday night, edutweetup.com. Very, very exciting about that. It's an unconference of sorts that HigherEdLive is hosting with a whole slew of speakers. It's sold out, but if you can't make it, tune in next Sunday because I'm going to be back here with Mike Petroff talking all about where is the 21st century university, and we're going to be talking about what the big takeaways were from EDU Tweet Up. So if you guys can't make it to Boston on Friday, you can make it right back here next week for HigherEdLive. So we start each week with a little something that I like to call the Weekly Five stories from around the world that you should probably read because they have something to do with education, and I find them kind of interesting. So let's check out the first Weekly Five. First Weekly Five is a great post, again, plugging him again. Mike Petroff did a great post about Facebook pages versus Facebook groups, and it's a really interesting, well, not debate, but friendly conversation between himself and a gentleman, Logan Bishop, about what's better to use for prospective students, Facebook groups or Facebook pages for incoming students. And you guys read the article, tell me what you think and what your takeaway is, but I'll tell you what my takeaway is, and that's, it doesn't really matter which you use as long as you use it right. But read the article and let me know. I thought it was a really interesting read. I think that Mike did a great job writing it up. It's a great discussion. It's something that I'm asked all the time, which should I use? And something I'm going to be referencing for folks if they ask me that again in the future. Next one, going out, we're talking about rebranding, aren't we? Well, this is a great post about rebranding a campus ministry, which is a really great higher ed marketing blog article this week. It's dead on topic, so we got to get a link out and make sure you guys read that. After all, it's what we are talking all about today. And then coming up next after that, Amazon is announcing textbook rentals via the Kindle, and they're claiming up to 80% savings. This is an interesting development as far as digital education goes. Is it possible that textbook rentals could actually make textbooks finally affordable? The short answer, if you really look at the numbers, is probably not, unfortunately. They're not going to be much more affordable than, say, buying a book used, but it is something to follow. It's been unfortunate so far, I think, that textbook rentals hasn't been able to make textbooks easily affordable for kids, but I think it's something we still need to follow because that could absolutely change. And Amazon getting into the running is something not to think lightly of. So it's definitely something to follow. Also this week, the 2011 Noel Levitt's E-Expectations Survey came out, which is a slew of information. They do a ton of surveying of parents and students, and they find out all information about what their thoughts are, what they use. Do they look at video on your site or YouTube? Do they use your Facebook? Do they read student blogs? This is a must-read, guys, and that's why I'm sending it, but I gotta admit, I haven't actually read it yet myself. I know, I was hoping to get away with saying I read this, but I didn't. It's really long. So I am going to read it on the plane when I'm flying back to LA, I promise. But in the meantime, tell me what you think of the E-Expectations Survey if you read it, because clearly I didn't yet. But it's on my must-read list, and that's why it's on the Weekly 5. So it's on there. But we have one more, I believe. Let's pull it up and get it out there. This is an interesting story, I thought. A Chinese professor was criticized for requiring iPads in his class. And when I say requiring, I mean requiring that students bring them and use them, but not actually helping them buy them at all. The professor essentially said, it was a finance class he was teaching, I believe in a graduate program. He said if his students couldn't find a job and afford an iPad on their own, they probably shouldn't be taking his class. Ouch, dude, that's kind of harsh. And thankfully the institution came down hard on him. They changed that. I was just a little bit shocked by that, I have to say. I just think it brings up a point that I've always felt that I'm afraid of, is that as more technology advances, as wonderful as this is, we're really at risk of leaving behind a core group of our students, and those are our students that are most financially in need. And again, I love iPads, I have one, but when we start thinking about this kind of technology in the classroom, we have to make sure that if we're going to incorporate it into the classroom, we're also going to incorporate a strategy on how we can make sure this is something that all students can access. Because the last thing we want to do is have a new advancement in technology be a barrier to success for any of our students. That's the last thing we want, and I think this example of a professor requiring that students go out and get another job to make it happen just kind of hammers that home a little bit. So that's the Weekly 5 stories from around the world you should think about, read, star, or like me, tell other people to read without reading yourself. And it's going to lead us now to the unsolicited shout out of the week, where I shout out any person, place, thing, or idea, because this is my show and I can do that. So if you want to shout anything out, you guys can use the hashtag right now, but I'm going to do it right now myself. And of course, who's getting the shout out this week? readMedia for hosting HigherEdLive here today. We're very grateful for them inviting us and everybody here to hang out in their offices. We're very grateful. If you don't know about readMedia software makes it easy for colleges and universities to promote students' achievements in print, online, and in social networks. More than 350 institutions nationwide rely on readMedia to connect every day with families, alumni, and future prospects. So guys, check them out. I'm going to be talking to them after the show, getting some more information. So if you want to know more about them, look for a post coming from me at some point in the near future. I just got to, get back to LA, make things happen, but we're going to make this work. So welcome back, guys. HigherEdLive. Let's just get right into the topic, right? That's why we're all here. If you guys have something to say today, let me know. We're going to be pulling up your tweets. We're going to be sharing them on screen. We're going to make this happen. So what do we talk about first, right? Let's see, guys. When we're talking about rebranding, we got to start at the beginning. So before we discuss it specifically, let's talk about what is institutional brand and why is it so important. So Rachel, what is a brand for an institution?
I like Seth Godin's his definition. So I use that as our core definition set to go from. That is, a brand is a set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. For colleges and universities, it's the same thing. It's the image or the perception that our audiences develop of our institution. And that comes from conversations with peers, with family members, with guidance counselors, seeing ads, viewing websites, visiting the campus, getting stuff in the mail, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it is. When you talk about the accumulation of all of those things, that is obviously what an institution's brand is, and that's a lot of stuff. So when we talk about rebranding, I think, where do we start with that? What does rebranding actually entail? Because that's something that we hear about a lot in higher ed. Oh, this institution's going through a rebranding right now, and I don't think it always means the same thing to everybody.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Rebranding could happen if you have a new name for a school or an overall institution. Maybe there's a new term, a new symbol. You're looking for a new design, a new image. You have a new core offering. There's all sorts of different things that could be different reasons to rebrand.
It's so important, but when you look at rebranding, then you have to ask, why do we need to rebrand? Like, when do you actually know if your brand is in trouble? And okay, this is something we need to start considering. There's a lot of reasons, but I know we talked before about this we broke it down a little bit into 5 key things that we think if any of these hit home with you, you might want to think about one of the, maybe, reflecting back and possibly doing a rebrand.
That'd be name change, core offerings change, so you expand your core offerings, maybe you're repositioning your university. Or a third would be if your admission counselors are regularly hearing inaccurate perceptions, so they're hearing one thing but you think you're promoting another and that's not resonating with your audiences. A fourth would be one of your key metrics has dropped significantly, so all of a sudden you're down a high percentage in applications from the year prior, or your donations are down a significant number too. The fifth one would be wicked inconsistency. That's what I call it. No 2 pieces, no 2 websites, sound or look like they came from the same institution or the same school within.
Yeah, I think the wicked inconsistency is an awesome one. I like that as number 5. It's something that you see all the time, that that from looking at something on the surface you can't tell that it's from the same institution or not. So that's a really big one, and obviously the name change is one that we hear about a lot. Obviously, clearly, if you're having a name change, you're going to need to rebrand. That's a given. But some of the other ones that we just discussed are not always the case. Wicked inconsistency, it might require an audit or a drop in key demographics, and it takes some research. So some of the stuff is proactive. But again, your rebranding is not just the name change. It can happen anywhere.
And it's not just a logo. It's not just, we want a shiny new logo, so we're rebranding. That's not what a rebrand is all about.
Exactly. That's one of the big things I found that people have an inconsistency with rebranding is I think rebranding is redoing your graphic identity. And that is clearly a key component of a rebrand, and that's its own thing too, but it is not rebranding entirely. And that's something people think, we got a new logo, we did a rebrand. But we just said your brand is so much more than your logo. It's the way people think and feel about your institution, how they experience things with you. It's every piece of material you ever send them. It's your website, it's everything. And just changing the logo isn't changing your brand. So keep that in mind. There's totally a time and a place to just redo your graphic identity, and that's incredibly important. But rebranding is looking at, I think, a little bit more of a macro lens and including the graphic identity, but not simply staying and leaving it at that. So let's just say you looked at your institution and you found wicked inconsistencies, as we said for number 5, or perhaps something else. Where do you start with rebranding? I mean, where do you even begin to do this? Because this is something that I've asked a lot of folks, and the answer is not always the same. So, I'm going to ask you, what do you think? When you say, okay, we've decided we need to do a rebrand, for whatever reason, we've hit one of those 5 things that we discussed, where do you start?
Research. If you've already made the decision and you don't have research to back it up, you need to do research first. Data has to rule this. So data will show you which of those key metrics has all of a sudden taken a nosedive that you're trying to fix, to reconnect with your audiences again. You need to bring in your stakeholders, your key stakeholders across campus, your alumni, prospective students, their parents. Get them involved in this process. Make sure that they have a voice in this, especially through the initial market research. Yeah.
And that's so huge, it's just involving your key stakeholders. We're going to talk a little bit more about some problems people have run into with rebranding or things you need to make sure you do. I think the biggest thing is, again, starting early by doing research and then identifying key stakeholders is just so important, because if you leave someone out, they're going to be pissed about it. That's kind of the way things work. And you want to respect them and value them, and you want them to know that you're listening to their voice and you're hearing them. And so that does mean breaking down, who are your key stakeholders. And that's different for every institution, but I have to think a lot of it's the same. It's perspectives, current students, it's faculty, it's staff, it's alumni, maybe it's community members, and it's putting this on paper and really thinking about maybe do they have a role or something to say in this process.
Mm-hmm. And I really think picture speaks 1,000 words. Something I did last fall at my college, I worked with a colleague to do a complete audit of all the web properties, print publications, email newsletters, athletic uniforms. We went out and we got either screenshots or took photographs of all of these different things, signage on campus, and we put it together in one PowerPoint presentation, and I did a traveling roadshow. I went to almost 20 different meetings in a couple of months' time span in the fall and just clicked through just to show this enormous, wicked inconsistency. I didn't even have to say anything or make a case for why we were doing this. The pictures spoke 1,000 words. So. And
when you say that, we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to show a picture because it's I love my institution, but UCLA went through a graphic identity rebrand specifically a few years ago. And here's just a quick glance at what we looked like before we had a single logo. This is just looking at logos alone, not looking at signage on campus or anything else. And this stuff is what happens to a lot of institutions. Clearly that's not consistent. And having that kind of visual to show people, I think, really does sell the point home, get people excited about it. And that's the thing too. Rebranding is an exciting process. I think it's a chance where you can actually empower people, get them really excited about your brand, and re-engage them. That's something I think a lot of folks have a problem with alumni, is how do we actually engage alumni, just as an example of a stakeholder. And ideally you don't want to just engage your alumni with 2 magazines a year and an ask around the holidays. And this is a chance to ask them to be a part of something that's positive and let them know that you still care about their thoughts, their opinions. So again, I agree with that. Visuals is a great way to sell this stuff and get it home. And then I think obviously the last thing is that it's this has to be connected to whatever your strategic plan is. I hope you have a strategic plan, and I hope if you do, it would be tied to this.
Ideally, you have an institutional strategic plan that's not marketing related. That's the overall vision for the overall college, connects with your mission, vision, values, and then you work off from that. You shouldn't be doing a rebranding in a little marketing bubble. It needs to be tied into the greater picture of the university.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And then last thing, obviously, is setting goals, too, is understanding, where do you want to end with this? I think rebranding isn't simply we want people to think positively of us, but for instance, you have a name change, or perhaps you have a pivot in your strategic plan that your institution is going to be starting to offer degree programs that it wasn't offering before. If you want to be, or you really want to target commuter students as opposed to on campus or online, these are things that really you want to have set goals. That okay, how is this going to tie in, and how is this going to lead us to the right place? And I mean, you know me, I love goal-driven projects always. So I think that's definitely key. So. So we talked about the signs that it takes a little bit to undertake a rebranding effort, but let's go into a little bit more. I think what about market research findings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might find that you have a fractured image. You have one audience, maybe prospective students have one image about your campus, and then alumni may have something very different because their time there was very different. So having a fractured image is a key aspect of this. Also, if your image is not current, an institution I used to work at was really fighting against the 60s, 70s party, I'll just leave it at party school, and that's not the campus that they are in the 2000s, and so they really were fighting against that misperception. Having the inconsistent identity throughout in different marketplaces, having higher education peers, so other faculty, staff, and administrators at other schools having one impression of you, prospective students another, having nothing matching. So again, just like the traveling roadshow I put together last fall, if your print pieces aren't using the same core messaging, the same visual identity as your website, as your email, as what your presidential hosts or student ambassadors are saying when they're giving tours on campus, those are all critical pieces. Again, if you are changing your name, there's been a number of universities that have changed their overall name. Then there's also schools within, which are even more common lately, if they get named with donations and things like that. Maybe you have a mission change. So you have core offerings that you're going to really zone in on things that you do really well as an institution. And so that's really, maybe you're not going to have 150 majors anymore. You're going to zone in on about 50 or 60 that you can do really well. You need to make sure that the marketplace knows about that. Other reasons you might do this is you've seen a huge decrease in applications, or significant enough to give you pause. Now, one thing about that is, especially in the Northeast here, we're dealing with census data that's showing us that our demographics are shifting heavily over the next, I think we're in the 5 to 8 year period now. And so there are fewer college-age bound students right now than there were 10 years ago. So we're fighting for fewer students as well. So you may see a decrease in applications because of that. You might see a decrease in donations. So fundraising is critical to universities right now. If you don't have that extra funding coming in, it's impossible to keep a smooth running operation. And maybe for another aspect might be you're attracting the wrong students. Maybe there's a certain kind of student profile you're looking for, students with a certain kind of SAT level, GPA, academic interests, and you're not getting the right students. A rebranding effort might be able to help with that and changing those perceptions too.
Yeah, now those are a lot of examples to look out for, and it's something that is important to know. I think is the responsibility of everyone. It's not just, okay, you're maybe the chancellor or the president or someone high up looking at the brand, but this is about talking to your peers and talking to everyone, asking admissions counselors what are they seeing, what are they hearing from students. This is just about just all of us being aware of this and then having some kind of collective dialogue to identify these problems. And while we are giving a lot of examples of problems that might be a red flag for, hey guys, you might want to rebrand, we found that in discussing this, there are some key elements of a rebranding campaign. Regardless of the cause of a rebranding campaign, there are some key elements that are generally pretty uniform across the board. So let's talk about a couple about the key elements that if we're going to undertake this, we want to make sure we're working with.
You want to start with, and I'm quoting my friend Lisa Jordan at one of the partner agencies that I work with, mission, vision, values. You want to start with that. Start with your institutional strategic plan. You need to develop core messaging. Make sure you have a strong, consistent, and flexible visual identity, and we were just talking about that a little bit earlier, and making sure it's not, you're not going to necessarily be able to have a one-size-fits-all. So what works for the overall institution may not work for some named schools underneath, but having a flexible framework to work from is really critical. Having an institutional integrated marketing plan. So that, again, is building off the institutional strategic plan, defining what the situational analysis, what are your goals, strategies, tactics, et cetera. A communication plan is critical too. How are you going to communicate this? That's related to PR, media relations efforts. Developing identity standards and making sure they're endorsed from the top. If you don't have endorsement from the top, they're DOA.
Yeah.
It's just not even worth having them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That you definitely need to have buy-in from the top for sure to support this stuff, or else people just aren't going to listen. Essentially, a campus can get really big, and if you really want things to be consistent, you need to make that happen by giving people the tools to do it for themselves and the encouragement from above to make sure that they are. Now, we do have a question coming in from the one and only Mike Petrov, so I want to pull that up. And he just says, he has a question for you, Rich, which is, how do you get both marketing and faculty to buy into a new image? Faculty sometimes seem tough to convince. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, they are tough, but I think I'll go back to the example I used earlier of a picture speaks 1,000 words. I'm going through a rebranding effort at my institution right now, and there certainly are faculty and staff and students alike that will have opinions against what we're doing, but I think we have a much larger buy-in than the institution has ever seen before, and that's because we showed them the wicked inconsistency that was going on and what could be done. We gave them some inspiration. We showed what some other schools are doing and how successful they've been at doing it. And it's just really involving them, being as transparent as possible, involving them every step of the way, gather their feedback. They're critical in focus groups. They're critical in getting them surveys every step of the way. Not only did we do market research last fall, but we did a concept test this spring. So we concept tested everything we're doing that we're going to be going live with in September. And we made sure that faculty were part of that. They have voices in that. I also have a college-wide marketing advisory council. And we have almost 30 people from across campus on that committee, and we have, I believe it's 5 faculty representatives there. So and every dean. So we really did everything that we could to try to make sure that faculty had a voice in this effort.
And I just want to add one thing about the faculty issue. I mean, clearly working with faculty is always a unique situation. But one thing I will say from my experience that I've noticed as an observation is that some folks that run into problems with faculty are because they're sometimes bringing a solution to faculty before they ever brought a problem. And that's what we're talking about being visual. If you make sure everyone's on the same page with, we all agree this is a problem that needs to be addressed, then you work with the solution. I find it's a lot easier to get buy-in. It's harder to get buy-in when you're making this announcement. We've decided there's a problem, and here's the solution we've come up with. If the dialogue instead is, we've identified a problem, do you agree with us? Now that we all agree, here's the solution maybe we're leaning towards, or here's how we'd like to have you involved in the solution. A lot of it is an approach. And I think it is a lot about understanding how you're delivering that information and how you're listening and making sure that you are. But that's a really good question, Mike, so I appreciate you sending that one out. So looking at the key elements, we're talking about where do you start, right? What are some of the things you need first when you're really starting? You need buy-in, baseline research. You need key metrics. So I also have defining key metrics. This is a great point, a little bit more. So
yeah, some examples of some key metrics would be, what are you trying to do with this? Are you trying to get brand awareness? And is that one of the metrics you're going to be measuring later? Is it increasing applications by a certain percentage? You want to make sure you're very specific with the goals that you're setting. Increase quality of applications by X percent. Increase diversity by X percent. Acceptance rate, student profile, donations, etc. You want to make sure that you set goals up front that are tied to a specific measurable number that's meaningful too. Creating a plan that will go back and retest. So again, at Ithaca College, we did market research last fall, and we're considering that our baseline research, and we're planning to go back to that in 3 years and see and ask the same questions, perhaps a few more as well, but use that as baseline research so we can see how we've moved the needle over the 3 years through the course of the rebranding effort, and giving us a few years to go out with communications that support that effort.
Yeah, I mean, those are really great, I think, metrics that need to be defined early on, and clearly I think those are great things to look for. I just want to hop back for 1 second to a question then, which came in, which was, what about current students? And this is a really interesting one, because I think, when you look at the percentage, clearly current students make up a small fraction of all your alumni and overall, but clearly they're an incredibly passionate stakeholder. So my thought, before I touch you, is I think absolutely current students need to be involved and be included and invited to the table. I think one of the biggest things I hear from current students is simply the fact that they don't feel like they're included at all. And just including them alone, I think, is a really big success.
I give the same answer as I did for faculty, for students. They're the ones living and breathing the brand every single day. They're living the experience. So who better to tell us about what their impression is of the campus that they're living at every day or living right near than the students. We also, at our college, we have an integrated marketing communications major that is very popular. And we have, I am so passionate about the students in that program. I involved a number of them. A number of them work for my department, but also they're on that college-wide marketing advisory council that I mentioned. It's critical to get them involved. It's a great learning experience for them, but they're also a gold mine of information for us.
So we had another question coming in asking about how long did the rebranding process take, and let's take that and walk into also just defining success. So maybe defining success, and then how long did you give yourself to get there?
That varies by institution. It totally depends on the reason you're doing this to begin with. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all. I've been a part of a process that's been a 5 to 8 year process, and I'm about to be through one that would be 1 year from start to go live. So it really varies. I've known others that have done it in 3 or 4 months, actually, so on a smaller level. In terms of defining success, again, it's going back to those key metrics and finding ways, making sure you're tracking them. So especially in the enrollment management areas, so you're tracking application numbers, the student profiles, et cetera. You're working with development who's tracking the donations and things like that. So that's how, just going back to the numbers, data, it tells one part of the story. It's certainly not the complete picture. It's also about media hits. Hey, readMedia. Quantity, quality. If it's on message or not, it's not just about the number of hits, media hits that you get. And beyond the initial success, you talked about policing the brand earlier. I cringe when I hear that word on my campus. I'm trying to be much more inclusive and friendly about how we're going to be putting out our identity standards, and we think we're going out with something that's powerful enough that we're not going to have to tell people, no, you can't do this, you have to do this. That we have so much buy-in already, and when they see what we're able to do and the strength that's in the institutional brand, that they're going to want to be a part of it. So the other thing that we are doing, though, along the policing avenue is we're starting a trademarking and licensing program. This is a new realm for me. I've learned a tremendous amount about it just over the last 2 months. So we filed for a trademark for our institution's name. And now we've signed up with a company that specializes in trademark enforcement as well as licensing. And so the number one reason we're doing this is to protect our brand and for brand consistency. We are going to be making revenues behind the scenes. I don't even have a plan for how we're using those revenues right now. That's to come in the next month or two, because first and foremost, it's about protecting our brand. Right now, you can go to any number of stores, especially in our region, but even in national chain stores, and you can buy clothing and apparel that have our college's name on it, and they use all kinds of artwork. There's all sorts of different things that goes on. So this program that we're actually kicking off this week will help us tighten that down. So anything that uses our protected name will have to come through this program, and the vendors have to be set up as licensees, and there's a whole program behind the scenes to help support us on that.
That's great. I think those all are very key, obviously, definitions of success. I love it. One thing I just would add too is that you want your rebrand to be scalable. So just obviously, we can't go out there if you're in a graphic identity department, if you're in the web department, you can't go out and do everyone's work for them. So find a way to make it scalable. One simple thing is on the graphic front is a lot of schools do have like a graphic toolkit online where here's the brands or a site that describes the messaging. So a way to educate essentially as many people as possible to get them on board, because of course people are going to be joining your institution over time, people are going to be leaving, so finding a way to make it scalable and make it last, I think is really important if you're going to put the time in. So, before we get into an interesting question of is it worth the cost, I want to ask a question that Patrick Powers out there asked, which is, are there any pitfalls in the process you would caution others to avoid? And I have a feeling that might be a loaded question.
Sure, there's lots of different pitfalls. Let's see which ones I can talk about. It's important to have open communication with the core group that you're working with, whether it's on campus or a combination of off-campus partners and on-campus partners. Keeping an open dialogue, making sure that it's not just driven from the top, but that it's something that the entire campus community understands the value in. Without the value and the picture speaking 1,000 words, it's going to be extremely difficult, and it will seem like it was just done by this evil marketing office. So getting buy-in, involving as many people as possible, having things like a college-wide marketing advisory council. What other pitfalls? visuals are really personal. You know, when you're evaluating logos and visual treatments and things like that, everybody reacts differently to visual treatments, and it's very hard to separate your personal opinion from what is best for the institution. So while it may not be something that you'd want for yourself, perhaps that visual treatment or that logo is what's best for the institution. So it's very hard. It's making sure that you can step beyond your personal judgment, or not personal opinions. Colors are very sensitive, but test. Don't ever go out with anything you haven't tested.
Absolutely, and this brings up one pitfall I just want to mention that is very unfortunate, and I'm not sure you can really avoid that well, and that is having a logo leak. And I just want to mention this example. Again, no hard feelings to them whatsoever. University of Waterloo, you see their old logo here on the screen, and on the other side was just an example of what they were thinking about using. And unfortunately, it somehow leaked online in the middle of the rebranding process. And it was the worst way you want to communicate with your alumni, that you're going to be changing the logo or the image or how they feel about your brand. And I don't know if you can really avoid that pitfall without just being incredibly careful, and I'm sure they were too. But it's at least a problem that you need to acknowledge, is how are people going to engage with this experience the very first time, and trying to control that as much as possible, because that's an unfortunate story I remember hearing about, is that logo leaked before they could get their messaging together and get their their materials together for how they wanted to present this, and this was presented in a way they didn't want because it was leaked, and that was an unfortunate pitfall.
But another side to think of is we did concept testing again in March, and so we showed what a couple of different possible logo options would be. So technically we leaked them. That to me was the least of our worries, because it was all about the campaign surrounding it and the messaging behind it. So everybody, or not everybody, but a huge amount of our audience has seen our new logo already. We're just not going to be publicly using it until September.
Very good point. Very interesting. So now we're talking all this about rebranding, and then the question then comes up to me is, is it worth the cost? Depending on how you're doing your rebrand, how big it is, if you're doing it in-house or outside, it can be really expensive. I just saw one example from a university where they spent $1 million to do a rebrand that seemed majority focused simply on graphic identity. So, what's the return on investment for a rebrand? Is it really worth the money, especially in these hard economic times where we're raising tuition on students?
It really, again, it depends on what your goals are, what you're trying to do with this. It's easy to spend $1 million. It's easy to drop $500,000, especially if you're undertaking the most critical component, the market research on the front end and testing. That adds up quickly, but it's dollars well invested.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing about ROI too is just it's not worth $1,000 if you're going to do it wrong. And it could be worth a lot of money if you're going to do it right. So when it comes to is it worth it or not, it's whether or not you really needed to do it, and that was by using research and identifying whether or not it was a problem that needed to be solved. And then, if you're going to do it, what does it mean? How does people feel about it? And, again, if you do it right, I think it is, but it really depends. This is something that, this is an example, I think, where we can really look at the corporate world as very, very different. You see, Pepsi redoing their logo for tens of millions of dollars, and here's examples of schools spending a fraction of that. And people always say, higher ed needs to be more like a business. And yet, when people go out in like a marketing department and do something that's a very business-oriented idea, which is rebranding and spending this money to rebuild your brand, then everyone comes out and says, you should have never spent all that money. You should have been spending it on students. And so there is this kind of double-edged sword with that I think, unfortunately, is it going to be worth it? In the long run, it definitely might be, and in the short run, you're probably going to get a lot of flack for it not being it. You just have to be prepared maybe to message against that and respond to that, but that's probably an unfortunate critique most rebranding campaigns in higher ed will see. Rebranding on a smaller scale is one of the things I wanted to mention. Just briefly, institutions are so big sometimes, and they have so many smaller components, whether it's institutions that have hospitals or multiple graduate schools or even down to departments, down to classes, down to majors, down to clubs, museums. Great example. How do you begin to put a brand together that can encompass all of this? UCLA has, I think, 5 hospitals, 10 and 11 graduate schools. How do you put a brand together that can umbrella all of that?
It's possible. Again, it really depends. I go back to goals again, but if it's in the best interest of these individual units, that they don't need to carry the strength of the institution brand, having them as sub-brands makes perfect sense, especially in the names of hospitals and things like that. But many of them, if they use the medical center at Columbia University or something like that, tying it back to the institution name gives them strength with their name and their brand as well.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that giving them some room to grow and do their own thing within that is so important, and that's why there's some examples. I think one I mentioned was Loyola Chicago. I found did a great job of doing a rebrand where they had a consistent rebrand that was umbrella across the whole institution, but they found a way to provide people with messaging from within that. So depending on what school you were with or where you were on campus, you had they worked with you to individualize and customize that. Rebrand doesn't mean that everything is identical. It just means that the brand is consistent across, whether it's the different materials, the different ways people are engaging with you. So you can work with each institution to do that, but you definitely have to work with them, because there are going to be areas on campus that might go rogue a little bit and try and do whatever they want and make their own colors and do things. And that's, again, where policing comes in. But a lot of times I think if you provide them the resources and give them a really solid toolkit and work with them to customize it the way they want it, you can make it work. But ultimately, I think it has to be an umbrella brand that covers everything, or else it's not going to be consistent. You're going to get what we keep talking about, which is the wicked inconsistencies, which we so much want to avoid. So I think that's really important. And then the other thing I say is rebranding on a smaller scale. I just want to mention one other example that I found really interesting is that sometimes it also comes to rebranding on a key issue or a key message. So rebranding doesn't always just mean the entire institutional brand. It could mean one thing that you're perceived for. Just an example is University of Michigan, when they started getting a cut in state funding, decided very strategically, we're going to take more out-of-state students. So we're going to increase the number of out-of-state students that the University of Michigan takes in. And to do that, we're going to generate more revenue, and we're going to talk about it. And therefore, we are actually slightly shifting our strategic mission. And to do that, they've launched a campaign that they launched online where they acknowledged what they were doing, they explained why they were doing it, and it was one example where it wasn't clearly a full rebranding campaign, but it was a rebranding campaign in the sense that they wanted people to know that this is one core area where we're shifting a little bit, and they did have a full campaign behind that. So there are a lot of micro examples like that, I think, where it's not going to be campus-wide, but something about your core mission or your graphic identity is changing, and that can be a small project within this as well.
Another example, just very similar to that, there's a college in New York State that was just an all-girls school, and they recently opened it up to be co-ed.
That's a great example. And these are all challenges that come up, and the question is, how are you going to tell people, how are you going to let them know about this? And again, a lot of it comes down to communications. One thing, another example I mentioned too is SUNY has their Generation SUNY project where they talk, where they're trying to essentially redo the strategic plan, but they're doing a really interesting job of communicating with all of their institutions. It was, I think, 64 campuses in New York. Communicating with all of them, whether it's via social media, sending out, doing live streams, sending information, and communicating. So that was a good example, I thought, of communicating with an incredibly large system about a real big shift in your strategic mission. So I thought that was really interesting. But if you guys have examples out there, by the way, I definitely want to hear them. I want to showcase them. Your tweet stream is up there. So if you guys have other examples at all, let me know. But I want to ask, Rachel, I want to ask you about one in particular first, which is one that I will come out and say, I'm going to take a lot of flack for this. I didn't like it when I first heard about American University's WONK campaign. And I have over time come to admit that I think I was totally short-sighted on it. But you were telling me a little bit more about it. If you're not familiar, we'll tell you about this campaign, and I think it is an interesting example of rebranding.
I heard a little bit about it last fall at the American Marketing Association's, Symposium for the Marketing of Higher Education conference, mouthful. And I actually heard their vice president of marketing talking about it there. And I think it's a really interesting, it's a bold but very flexible campaign. So they're using the WONK idea, but they also have this thing they're calling WONK Light. And so they reverse the letters around, and so it spells no, K-N-O-W. And so they found that the different versions tested well with different audiences, again, going back to the importance of research guiding you. And, I also love the aspect that they've developed that in-house. I mean, they worked with partners on research, but the creative aspect of it was their creative team in-house. It's too early, and I don't think that I don't know if they're talking about public results yet, but I think they just launched this last spring or summer maybe. So, you really need a solid 2-3 years, and it depends on what they were trying to measure specifically to see if it was actually a success or not. But they certainly have gotten a lot of press about it, a lot of buzz on campus. They have artifacts all over campus for the different things. I'm a political wonk, I'm a journalism wonk, and they have little statues and things like that around campus that are actually carry the brand throughout the entire campus.
Yeah. And again, so the wonk one was, to me, it just kind of took me a little bit like, I understand the word wonk, reversing no, know everything forwards and backwards, but it rubbed me the wrong way, but I'm not their target. And it seems if they're doing research and they're seeing if it works or not, that's important. And that's one thing to mention too about rebranding is whether or not you want it to, everyone's going to comment on your rebranding. And whether or not, so the question is, if we measure success, measuring success doesn't simply mean that the broad public consensus thinks you guys did a great job. It really means who are your key stakeholders, who are the strategic people in your institution, what do they think about it? And that's really important to weigh those differently, because while I didn't really like the WONK campaign at first, not only have I come around, it also doesn't matter nearly as much what I think as it does about the people, their alumni, their students, their community. That's who they're really targeting that after. So,
and you're never going to get unanimous buy-in.
Ever.
Just Leave that at the door.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think one question I'd ask is, I mean, do you think it's at all possible to? I found it's. I can't think of an example, I guess, to say, of a rebranding campaign recently in higher ed that got just praise. All of them have been, well, it looks really good, but here's all this controversy. And I think that maybe it's just something about rebranding. I mean, you really are shaking someone's relationship with you. It's the same thing. People know that my background is in TV news. I started actually here in Albany, New York, at ABC. And one of the biggest things you could do to shake up the newsroom is to change an anchor. And if you change an anchor, oh my God, your phones went off the hook, because this is what people are used to seeing every night, the same person and talking to them. Now, it didn't matter that our news never changed. The messaging didn't change. The information didn't change. The quality of the news, the weather of this, nothing changed. We were providing them the same value, yet people were still furious with us because we changed something that they felt was theirs, this physical relationship, someone they were used to, they connected with. And that, to me, was a really big learning lesson, that as much as what you share is as important as how you share it and how they see you and how they perceive you. And again, I think that's one reason why almost every rebranding campaign is going to get some hate and some flack, because if you're changing the visuals, if there's a graphic identity component to your rebrand, I mean, you really are changing the very front lines of that relationship with the people at your institution.
Well, especially alumni, they can tend to be more sensitive. I mean, they have a very specific memory about their time with that institution, and if you're looking at changing it up or changing how you communicate that to the world, in many cases, hopefully it's in a positive way that makes them feel even stronger and have even more positive affiliation with their alma mater. But in some cases, they feel that's not the institution I went to.
Yeah. Now, Patrick Powers asked another great question just a couple minutes ago, so we're going to dig back to that, which is there any time that you would say someone should not do a rebranding campaign? So there are examples where you would say, hit the brakes, don't do it.
If someone is just saying, I just don't like our logo anymore, let's just do a new logo. That's not a rebrand, and that's not a reason to do an entire rebranding campaign.
I love it. I totally agree. When I saw that, I wanted to say initially, my response is the last reason you should ever do a rebrand is because someone told you should do a rebrand. You should ask them for why. If they give you why and they give you the case, that's great. But I think there's been a lot of rebrands that started with a closed-door meeting where somebody says, I don't really like this, that should be changed. And all of a sudden, 6 months and 6 figures later, we're back at the drawing board. And another good quote, someone said, you shouldn't do a rebrand 6 months after you did the last one. And that happens a lot too. I've seen people that do like another rebrand a couple years later because clearly the first one didn't really work.
And probably in those cases they didn't do the market research up front or concept testing along the way.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of unfortunate lessons that people learn through this process going through the first time. And that's probably why you see so many multiple rebrands coming out of some institutions. So guys, if you have any other questions, please get them in, because I am going to wrap up a little bit here with asking Rachel to give me some tips and tricks. What are some final takeaways that you want some people to have? And I'm going to share a few of my own. And if you guys have any other questions in studio, because we got some people here, or at home, let us know and we'll get those answered.
The first and foremost is communicating with your key stakeholders every step of the way. That's your current students, your faculty, your staff, your administrators, alumni. Get them involved. Again, get them into focus groups, send them surveys, whatever you can do. Go to their meetings. I went to alumni board meetings. Students have student government meetings, town hall meetings, all those kinds of things. Just make sure you're talking to them about what you're doing and sharing the data, sharing the rationale behind. Know when to listen and when to rule.
I like it.
Create something strong, grounded in research, and involve your key stakeholders. And you'll usually find the community will be more willing to adapt to what you want, what the new key elements are, and rather than going rogue. I found a couple of great articles, maybe we can tweet these later, that I really liked. One was Entrepreneur Magazine had a great article about the art of rebranding that we can share with the audience. Yeah. So did EMG, the Educational Marketing Group. They wrote one on focusing on successful branding recently. So we'll tweet those links out to you in just a bit.
Yeah, that's great. And guys, one other resource I'll tell you about is just rebrand.com. I don't know if you guys have checked it out before. It's just a site that collects a lot of information on rebranding. It does give out rebranding awards, not just for higher ed, but they absolutely include colleges and universities. And they do huge huge case studies, sort of a befores and afters with information. Just an example, they'll show you the previous logo, the way it looked before. Then they'll show you how the logo looked after. And they'll go a lot farther than that and give you, kinds of takeaways, paper materials. Folks can upload this stuff, and it's kind of neat to just look at what other people have done with rebranding, because the reality is undertaking a rebrand is a huge, huge process, and you're not the first one to do it. So definitely go onto a site like rebrand.com, read through case studies of what other people have done, and really kind of get as much of that information out there
Just
as
a quick
possible.
note about that site. They do focus very heavily on the visuals, so they focus in a lot on logos and comparing, contrasting, and pros and cons. So sometimes they go into other case studies, but it's largely visual.
That's a very good point, and definitely needs to be noted since, as we said, it's not just about graphic identity overhauls at all. So I think that's some really good takeaways with rebranding. The last thing I would just say too, it's the common statement, but seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think that's just a really good example in rebranding, that when you're going to these key stakeholders, first try to understand why they feel the way they do at your brand and why they may or may not want it to change. I mean, clearly one of the debates you're going to have is, I like this logo better than that logo. But way beyond that is, how do I feel about you? And why do I feel like maybe you're violating my personal space by simply changing this without telling me, or changing the way you're interacting with me? So if you work out and do these focus groups and you go out there, I think it's a great first start to understand what people think about you, because the more information you have, the smarter decision you're going to make in the long run. So guys, that is rebranding in education. Unless you guys have some more questions, I'm going to pull up Twitter, see what else is out there. But in the meantime, Rachel, I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been awesome.
Yes.
This has been so fun. In studio special with Rachel Reuben. I'm kind of excited about it.
First time meeting you, and he is larger than life.
Yeah, this is the first time in, ever, actually. It was about right before the show, so that's just the way we do it here at HigherEdLive. So guys, it looks like we're just about to wrap this up. We're going to send out some more links for you for resources. If you want to know more about rebranding, we're going to put a post together. We're going to put this up online, obviously, like every show, at HigherEdLive.com, with lots of links, lots of resources, lots of takeaways for you guys. Thank you all for watching at home, and thank you very much for all you guys that came out here to watch in person. We are going to go off and celebrate and have a couple beverages, have a good HigherEdLive celebration. And you guys can do that at home too. There's always beer with friends. So please feel free to join in. This has been HigherEdLive, and before I sign off, one last reminder, Wednesday, mark your calendars, July 27th, a special HigherEdLive from StayMate's Integrated Marketing Conference, Teens Talk, a live conversation with college-bound high school students. You don't want to miss this. Whether you work in admissions or not, guys, you're going to want to know what they have to say. Mark your calendars. And finally, next week, I am back in action with the one and only Mike Petroff, talking all about Where is the 21st Century University. It's a recap show of our special on Friday, EDU Tweet Up. It's a special unconference. Unfortunately, not live streamed due to some issues, but we're going to be recording everything, putting it all up, and bringing that information back to you guys all around the world. So, once again, Rachel, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody here at home. Thank you guys for watching a very special Albany, New York edition of HigherEdLive, and thank you to readMedia for hosting. So, like that, live applause. That's a nice new change. I'll see you guys next week. Take care.